Hey guys and welcome. I've been playing games pretty much my whole life and I would like to share with you my top 10 favorite games of all time. What is your top 5? You can leave that after you watch this video or now and then you can continue to watch the video. It's up to you. Okay, without further ado, let's jump into the tier list of my top 10 favorite games and I'll explain you why they were meaningful and impactful to me. Number 10. Number 10 is going to be Populous 2 Trials of the Olympian Gods. Populous 2 Trials of the Olympian Gods. That is actually the first RTS that I ever remember playing. In Populous 2, you take control of a deity in a kind of mythological setting, and this deity controls units not directly, but they automatically walk around and procreate. And all they want to do is to build buildings automatically on a piece of flat land. And so you need to make the land flat. And supposedly Bullfrog, that made the game back then, they were actually just trying to create a tool for themselves to raise and lower terrain, and then they gave that tool to the players. And that actually became the major gameplay that you would end up doing. You would raise terrain, lower terrain, make areas flat so that people would build on it. The bigger it is, the bigger of a castle it could become, which would then generate troop strength. And then what you would do is you would take the orb, which is a deity collection point, and then you would activate orb gathering, let's say. And then any villagers that you had, any pawns that you had, would walk into the orb and they would melt together, become a kind of captain planet, and you could then turn them into heroes, which were, I guess they were called gods or deities or something. Heroes like Adonis, but we called them Fireman, Earthman, Forestman, Water Lady. The Water Lady would convert enemy troops. The Forest Man would split every time into two similar heroes of half strength. This was so interesting. You had a number of spells you could cast, like tornadoes and storms. You could drown the enemy villagers by lowering the terrain and making them drop in water. Sometimes fires would break out and you would try to douse the fires by creating water or using spells on it. It was a really interesting concept for so long ago. It came out in 1993, and we realized, me and my brothers, we realized we're big fans of the RTS genre. This is the first one, played it for years. At some point, the disk actually got corrupted. The floppy disk that we had got corrupted and wouldn't run anymore, except if I did a special maneuver. Like, it just straight up wouldn't run when we put it in. And I developed this technique, a kind of floppy disk whispering technique, where I requested everyone leave the room, and then I would put in the disk. I would look at how the bullfrog hand would transform. The Windows cursor would transform to a bullfrog hand, which was the developer symbol. And then I had to quickly eject the floppy disk again. And then I would put it in again, and I would listen to the loading on the drive. And if it sounded just right, I left it in. And then the game would actually boot. And if you just straight up put it in normally, it wouldn't work. It's crazy. That's the only way we could still play it. Kind of a little magic there with an old floppy disk. Number 10. Next game, number 9, is going to be Fantasy Empires. Made by Silicon Knights. Fantasy Empires is a Dungeons and Dragons licensed game where you play as a nameless controller of a turn-based strategy empire. And the reason it was really meaningful is because you could play it in hot seat. You could play it against each other. So you would take turns and you would manage your empire. You would spend gold that you would earn from the owning of provinces. You could recruit humans, orcs, halflings, dwarfs, dark elves, and normal elves. You could create catapults and ballista to siege the enemy castle. And all of this was turn-based. Then you could use magic users to generate red magic, which could cast Death Spell and animate dead. And you would have blue magic, with which you could do True Sight and turning the undead and other spells. And then you would even have green magic as well, which you could only get if you transformed one of your starting heroes, a cleric, into a druid. It was really, really an amazing game for its time. 1993, we were 7 and 9 years old. And you could play it in hot seat. And when you had a battle against each other with troops, it would become real time. The battles were in real time, so you would sit next to each other and both have half side of the keyboard. And we played this for years. My brother and I, my best friend and I, and it was great in single player as well. You could have up to 5 players in a game. And I've played it recently. I still have it on my computer now. There was a remake on GOG.com. It's still as good as it was, but there's only one problem. The clock speed of PCs nowadays is too fast for the battles, and it wasn't made with that in mind. So the battle's over in 1 second. So you have to dial down the clock speed during the battle with a hotkey in order to keep it kind of manageable and make the fights keep working. But we've played this game for years. I have so many hours in it. It was such a great introduction to the turn-based strategy genre with real-time battle that still reminds me, games like Total War Warhammer 3 are so similar to it, right? Where you also have a world map that's turn-based, but then you go into battle and it's real-time. So that genre goes back a long time, and this was my first wonderful introduction to it. On number 8 is going to be Heroes of Might and Magic 3, the restoration of Erathia. Played to this day mostly by a large fan base from Eastern Europe. The game is super popular there, but it has worldwide acclaim as one of the most beloved instances of the Heroes of Might and Magic series. Some people will say number 2 is better, some people will say number 4 is better, and there's a couple of fans that will staunchly defend Heroes of Might and Magic 5, 6 or 7 over some of its earlier brothers or sister games, Heroes of Might and Magic 3, but I believe this is where the series peaked, either this one or number 2. And it is just a wonderful combination of amazing music, awesome gameplay. I think the game is best when you're a noob and you're not metagaming and kind of like playing it competitive multiplayer where you're taking your fastest units and you put them on your main hero, and then you ferry all the other units away from your main hero at the end of the turn to give you a movement speed boost in your next turn, and then you use 7 heroes as a mule and you've got 1 main fighter. I think it was a lot better when we were noobs, and I was a big noob in the game, and I played this game for years. I still like to come back to it every now and then. Amazing music, setting, a wonderful magical world, very lovely town-based music for each faction. The city building is fun. You've got a lot of amazing, interesting doodads to interact with on the map. And best of all, you can play it hot seat against your friends and family, and I did a lot. Number 7 is going to be a little bit less well known, Age of Wonders. Now, not everyone likes the science fiction setting as much as it is a departure from the fantasy setting of Age of Wonders 1, 2, 3, and 4, but I feel like the game had a lot of amazing features that set it apart quite a bit from other 4X games in the genre. Age of Wonders Planetfall has a pleasing turn management system. I think there is some bloat in the late game actions, which is something that many 4X games suffer from in micromanagement requirements, but a lot of it can actually be automated. Unit movement can still be a slog in the super late game, like turn 100, 150, though accelerated force deployment and orbital relay platforms help out a lot with that, so that you can move quickly across the map. There's also multiple different win conditions, so it is not necessarily necessary to use Conquest to hunt down every last town of your opponent and their hero, their main starting hero. After all, the win condition for Conquest is to kill their commander and take their capital, and then have that last for a bit, right? But then once you get into combat, I really like the world management system of moving around and interacting with different unique interaction points, like points of interest, let's say, creep camps and taking over cities and whatnot. But once you get into the battle, I feel like that's where the game really shines. It is a kind of XCOM-like combat system, which is a departure from the bash units into each other in Civilization 2, for instance, which was also a very good game, or a departure from the more simplified Heroes of Might and Magic combat that is also very good, but is mostly units just attacking each other with a couple of special unit spells, and of course you've got your commander spells as well. But Age of Wonders Planetfall combat is really deep. It can take hours to do a really big battle appropriately, and so you really need to enjoy that kind of nerdiness. There's also a bit of a learning curve on both the world map as well as the combat itself, but once you really get down into it and you understand it, I think it's one of the best games in the genre. That's a lot of fun. It is super enjoyable to combine different factions and to combine secret techs which is basically how you comprise your starting civilization. You choose one of 8 factions and one of 8 secret techs. You can then combine them to make different permutations possible that can give you some cool synergy options that make it more special than just pre-chosen civilizations, but less customizable than a game like Humankind or Age of Wonders 4, where everything is more fluid. Perhaps too fluid, at least in my opinion. So I think Age of Wonders Planetfall, one of my favorite games. I've streamed it a bit. I have about 260 hours on it now. One of the games I played the most off stream in the last couple of years. Great game, would love to come back to it anytime. Number 6 is a bit of a newcomer. This was introduced to me because of Sub Sunday. Sub Sunday is a concept where my subscribers were able to vote and nominate for games that they thought would be cool to see me play. And it introduced to me Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire is one of the great roguelite card games. Supposedly one of the founders of the genre, or if not the founder of the genre. Love this game so much. It is a single player game that actually feels a lot like reproducing the gameplay loop of a multiplayer game. You know, I love multiplayer games. I've played a lot of online games competitively. Slay the Spire is a single player game, but it feels very much like grinding down a better StarCraft 2 build order against opponents, because there is a kind of repetitive gameplay loop that is extremely challenging and enjoyable. There's always minute little changes, and that feels like how multiplayer games evolve the meta. You need to get tighter with your card choices, right? There's 4 different factions without any mods. The Downfall mod apparently greatly transforms the game into even more fun, but I'm delaying going for the Downfall mod because I first want to get to higher ascension levels with the main classes. So in Slay the Spire there's 4 classes, and you start with 10 basic cards, and you can then remove cards or add cards as you travel over 3 maps, defeating bosses along the way. And it's a very enjoyable gameplay loop, super fun to play on and off stream, and I have done so. Always a different class to try, and because it's moddable, people have been adding new classes to it. They even added a class which is Axe from Dota 2, and he's got all the abilities that you would imagine, his Dota 2 abilities, and then you can play with that. A lot of fun. I foresee a lot of future enjoyment there as well. Number 5 is going to be not my introduction to Blizzard games, but perhaps my most favorite follow-up Blizzard game after being introduced to Blizzard games with Warcraft 2. I love Warcraft 2. It didn't make this list. It was really iconic for me. I think it's very close to being on this list. It just didn't have as much of a comparative impact, perhaps. Its sequel, StarCraft Brood War. StarCraft Brood War heading into the fantasy setting for the first time with Blizzard's RTSs. I love this game so much. I played it online and offline. I think it is the whole package. For its time, fantastic graphical portrayal of the game that you're playing. 3 incredibly asymmetric races that all have their interesting gameplay that is very distinct, and somehow it's still all relatively balanced. For its time, despite a couple of tropes and cliches, a very fun and enjoyable campaign. And me and 2 of my brothers, we all had our own race, so we kind of competed against each other as well when the story developed. We played it kind of out of sync, but I would play Protoss, and one of my brothers was Zerg, and another was Terran, and we all rooted for our own faction. And I found that the gameplay and the storytelling really allowed for that as well, because there were not always clear winners, clear, let's say, heroes and villains. There was different moralities, there were some interesting story developments, some transformations, and I was all there for it. The gameplay itself was amazing, and still is amazing as well, with iconic voice lines, absolute bangers of music tracks. It just had the whole picture. You just wanted to be inside that menu, inside that world. When you started StarCraft Brood War or StarCraft Original, it immediately greeted you with music that just was absolute music to your ears, and the voice lines are iconic and good to this day. Even with all of our technology and all of the resources that are available in this day and age, we still see countless games coming out that do not capture the magic that StarCraft Brood War did when it came out, even though you would think that the resources now available are better. The voice acting was just legendary, the gameplay just really hit the spot, and of course even Blizzard couldn't have predicted how big it would become. And it was a major dot in the red line, in the red thread of my life, of my gaming life, and I love it to this day. Number 4 is going to be the first game of a genre that I didn't think I would ever start on. For you see, this is an offshoot genre of another of my favorite games that will be later on the list, and I didn't really think that this genre would be much for me. After all, it's too easy to control just a single unit when you could control so many. I love controlling many units and being the commander of an army, and how could you have fun controlling just one hero, especially in a kind of cartoonish looking world that doesn't really have much of a story? I started playing it with friends because I kept hearing my wife laugh from the other room, having so much fun with the game, and I wanted to go play with them. In the meantime, I was crying because I kept losing to Swarm Hosts in StarCraft 2, having 3-hour games that seemed interminable. I would end my stream tilted every single time. Meanwhile, my wife was laughing from the other room so hard that I could hear it. I thought, I want to get in on some of that fun action. Maybe there is a life after StarCraft 2, and there was. Heroes of the Storm was my first full-time streaming game. I started playing it clandestinely, covertly, with my wife and some friends. Meanwhile, I should be kind of practicing for StarCraft 2, but I really didn't have the heart for it anymore at the end of 2014. And so at the end of 2014, I was playing Heroes of the Storm instead of practicing StarCraft 2. Really, I had some big questions in my life where I wanted to take my career and what I wanted to do with gaming. For StarCraft, I would get viewership anywhere between 2,000 to 6,000 viewers on average. So suddenly introducing another game, something I wasn't known for, seemed like a really risky play. But during one Christmas where we all had a drink, one of my friends recommended, shall we just go live with this? Why don't you just turn on your stream, Grubby? And I did that Christmas of 2014. I went live with Heroes of the Storm. What the hell is this? People asked. Viewership, not impressive, probably in the 100, 200, 300 instead of thousands. And nonetheless, I found that I had way more satisfaction enjoying and sharing this joy of this game with people. Those 100, 200, 300, that was enough for me. Of course, I wanted to also make my StarCraft viewers happy and give them what they wanted, but I didn't have the heart in it anymore to give them what they wanted. So I really felt like I was ready for a new journey. And January 1st, 2015, I decided to start on that journey. I would see how good I could become at HOTS. Since I was having so much fun with the game, it was like a brave new beginning. And it's Blizzard. What could possibly go wrong, right? Everything that Blizzard touches turns to gold. I'm in on it early. Of course, the game was a little expensive. It's $10 per hero, $7 for that hero, $3 for that hero. Seemed a little bit greedy, but you know, with the game being that good, and after all, everything that they've done for me and for the entire world with their games, what could possibly go wrong? So it's only going to get better from here on out. And I was already a massive fan of the game, enjoying it every time. So I started streaming it, and I did that for, well, basically until nowadays. So I have been streaming it for almost 10 years. Of course, full-time only for about 3 years, and then I started mixing it with others. I've had so much fun with the game. It 100% deserves to be on my top 10 list. Just a really fun, wacky game where the game doesn't take itself too seriously, and you can just play with your friends. It's not too hard to get into. There's really a team aspect. You can't chat with your opponent. Toxicity is greatly disincentivized via both its game design as well as the permissions that you have inside the game. It may not have the highest highs of some other more socially volatile MOBAs that exist out there, but it doesn't nearly have as low of lows as the other MOBAs either. So HOTS, I think, is still a great game to this day. I still hope it's going to get further developed by Microsoft/Blizzard, but even if it doesn't, I have lovely memories in the game, and it is my number 4 of all time. Number 3 is actually introduced to me by someone that at the time was working at Blizzard. I had known them since early Warcraft 3 days, as they were a creator on the WCReplays.com forums. They had started to work for Blizzard, doing esports and other things. And one time when we were at BlizzCon, she winked at me and my wife and said, I think we're releasing a game this BlizzCon that you and Cassandra are really going to like. And my god, how right she was. Hearthstone Battlegrounds had been announced at BlizzCon, and I was there able to play it first before anyone else was able to play it. I immediately fell in love with it. I knew it's going to be a big thing and immediately loved it. Yes, I was talking about Bunny. That's right, Tafsiri. Ah, you know them. So Hearthstone Battlegrounds came out. We played the classic game, you know, just standard. Then there was arena mode as well, which we loved. I played 2 Christmases, one Christmas and then the next year's Christmas as well, with my wife side by side. We're both playing arena, both complaining about the opponent's 4th flame strike and their amazing card luck. But we had our share of 12 arena wins as well from time to time. But perhaps Battlegrounds itself was the biggest innovation of all for us and for me. So Battlegrounds is something I still like to play off stream from time to time, and it's also something that was announced at a later BlizzCon. The first time I played it, I remember a lot of standard/tournament Hearthstone players that I would talk with. They said they don't think it's gonna be as big as standard. Of course, they were deep into standard because they were tournament players and streamers in it, so Battlegrounds felt like a quirky little side mode that couldn't possibly threaten the main status quo. That's what I thought about MOBAs and my RTSs. There's no way that MOBAs or World of Warcraft could possibly overtake Warcraft 3 or other games, and I was wrong and so were they. I think Battlegrounds is now the main mode for Hearthstone. It definitely is for me. And I knew the very first game that I started playing it, at BlizzCon, I was immediately hooked. During that BlizzCon, in the press room, you could play Hearthstone Battlegrounds as much as you liked if you were a VIP. And we were. But you could also play Diablo 4, and I played that for a bit, and I was like, that seems pretty fun. Now let's try this one, Battlegrounds. And then I couldn't be batted out of the room with a baseball bat. Yes, I was stuck. I had friends there that I was connecting with as well. They had to wait for me a bit there, meet them a little later. I'll be there later. I'll be there a little later. Still playing a little bit of Hearthstone Battlegrounds. And it's just a fun game that I think the developers are doing a lot of good play with, a lot of good changes with. They keep updating the game with different things like quests, quest rewards, and new heroes and new cards, and taking other cards out and rebalancing. I think it's one of the best live service games that I've ever played with constant updates. That's number 3. Number 2, and I feel like at this point it could become a little controversial. We're gonna throw some hands. Or maybe I'm just more sensitive to that now, because of course there are other places to throw hands as well. But number 2 is gonna be Dota 2. It was not easy whether I should put this on number 1 or number 2, but I cannot 100% separate the community from the game, as it is a multiplayer game. Now, the community definitely isn't all bad, though there was of course a little bit of a salty taste, since my patience eventually ran out with the somewhat toxic community that Dota 2 has. Look, I am no angel either. I'm not saying I'm better than them. I'm just saying I couldn't take it anymore, so I needed to take a step away. That was a recent change. But before that, Dota 2 was an innocent discovery. Part of my journey of becoming a variety streamer, trying out different things and not trying to pigeonhole myself as much into singular or just 2 or 3 games that I felt comfortable with. Trying out new games was going to become a way of life for me. My variety journey started and I tried Counter-Strike and, you know, many other games. Then I tried out Dota 2, was gonna try out League of Legends soon after that. And this was in August 2022. But then I thought, hey, why would I ever play anything else than Dota 2? And before I knew it, I needed to play 6 hours of Dota 2 per day, or I didn't feel like I really had a day. Very fun to jump into the game. It is an incredibly deep, complex, and interesting game that also shattered my illusion that Warcraft 3 is far more complex and difficult than a MOBA could ever be. It shattered that idea altogether to smithereens. Not only was there the team play component, but the vast amount of different heroes and items made Dota 2 a complex game in and of itself. While mechanically not always as difficult as some of the hardest RTSs that I've played, for instance StarCraft 2, though there are some mechanically more demanding heroes in Dota 2, the knowledge requirement for the game is basically infinitely high, even to the point where the best professional gamers in Dota 2 do not know how to quote every stat by heart and do not know how every interaction is going to unfold when asked about it. That is impressive because these are people that dedicate 10 to 14 hours of their day to Dota 2 every day for the last 10 plus years. Dota 2 is a fantastically exciting, fun game with huge high highs, but unfortunately also with some pretty low lows. You're not allowed to forfeit in the game, and games can take up to an hour. This naturally creates an environment where it becomes a little irritating to be in a game that you think is lost already, or you think you're with teammates that are not very promising peers. So that can lead to some frustrations, and if you allow those to build up, then you may become that which you once reported. And because I did not want to become that, I distanced myself from the game for now. But I have not uninstalled the game yet. After all, Dota 2 is my number 2 favorite game of all time now. I think it is a wonderful, wonderful game. And I still like to watch it very much. And it has a deserving spot here. Before I unveil my extremely surprising number 1 game of all time, I would like to also explain why StarCraft 2 is not on the list. There are many games that very nearly could have made the cut but didn't, for instance Civilization 2 and also StarCraft 2. StarCraft 2, I cannot remove the disappointment and the... I don't want to say trauma. I am a gamer living my best life. And it is a life of luxury that I can play games for a living as a pro gamer and as a streamer. I don't want to use the word trauma lightly, like I had to work in a cave getting whipped as a slave or something. That's trauma. But I don't think traumas should necessarily be compared and that only the worst one is allowed to be talked about. And I do have a bunch of symptoms that are akin to it. I get very mad anytime I talk about the game. Even though by rights, when I think about it, I shouldn't get mad. There's my intelligence saying I shouldn't get mad. If you don't like a game, then just don't play it. You buy the game, that's the only... And then you enjoy it. That is the only transaction between you and the developer. Any other expectation is entitlement. I get all that. And still I get mad when I think and talk about the game. Because I think an RTS should be very careful to include free unit generation. I think you should be very careful about it. Swarm Host Locust, Infestor Infestaterrans, Broodlord Broodlings. And I feel like the game has never been really balanced in a design point of view. So I don't mean balanced by win rate. Sometimes win rate can be 50%, but the design of the game, if you look into the future, if you see the potential, you can see that while Protoss may be the easiest to play or to get higher with, it is not the one that you can reach the highest with by design. And it seems like that will never be possible unless they can win via cheese. And that doesn't feel good. And so, yeah, I have a lot to say about it, but I could do a whole video about it because of how I feel Blizzard handled the design, the balancing. Blizzard was watching their own esports having 3-hour games of Swarmhost Slugfest, Zerg versus Zerg. They watched that for months, years. They watched Broodlord Slugfest, and they still came out with the Swarmhost for Heart of the Swarm. They watched Heart of the Swarm Slugfest 3 hours. At some point, Zerg versus Zerg players tapped out of the game, went to Twitter to tweet the Blizzard esports account and say, "Are you seeing this? Are you okay with this?" They didn't even have to play the game because the units keep attacking by themselves. So yeah, and then I can't imagine being a developer and being like, "Oh, that's okay. We'll just leave it like that and let the esports scene self-destruct." So like, yeah, maybe I'll do a video about it sometimes, but it's not going to be a feel-good video, if that's what you're looking from me. So anyway, that's why StarCraft 2 didn't make the list, because it could have made the list. It is an extremely well-made game, great engine, You know, great sound design, graphically fine and everything. Very fun. I had many years of great times with it. And I think it's one of the best communities I've ever been a part of. StarCraft 2 players are very intelligent. I see many StarCraft players in chat right now, and you are some of the finest and most intelligent people that I know. SC2 is in fact my discovery that I'm not that intelligent, because there were so many smart players in the scene. Like in Warcraft 3, I was like, I don't know. But like SC2, I'm like, oh my god. Wow, gamers. So anyway, that's why it didn't make the list. For number 1, it's gonna be Warcraft 3, The Frozen Throne. Warcraft 3, The Frozen Throne, it would be an understatement to say that it was life-changing and that it was one of my favorite and is my favorite game of all time. No way, I know, right? No way! Warcraft 3, not Reforged, true, not Reign of Chaos. Warcraft 3, The Frozen Throne. Warcraft 3, The Frozen Throne, let's see. It got me out of high school and into a career. I found my girlfriend, now my wife, through it, as she was a major fan of the game as well. Before that, of course, I just fell in love with the game. I was still in high school, and I just loved the concept of an RTS that combined with RPG elements. The game had an amazingly chill soundtrack, iconic and characteristic voice lines. The campaign was really interesting, but what really drew me was the multiplayer. 4 different races, extremely asymmetric, with no unit being truly useless. Everyone had their niche. And the battles. The battles were so interesting to fight over. Whereas in StarCraft Brood War, I often remembered going online. I wanted to go play some games. I play Zerg, I make my hatchery. Before you know it, some douchebag took his medevac, his dropship I should say, put a siege tank in it, 3 marines and an SCV, and he dropped them on the cliff on Lost Temple, and he starts shelling away on my extractor. He's got a siege tank there, he already built 2 turrets with his SCV, and there's a bunker with 3 marines in it. I make 4 Mythalists, I can't break it anymore. Getting out-cheesed. And I think some of the greatest strengths of Warcraft 3, you're much less vulnerable to cheese, so you get to play the game every time. Additionally, unlike in SC2 and SC1, if you are 5% better than your opponent in Warcraft 3, I feel like that weight generally matters. You are actually able to win very consistently against people that you're better than. Whereas in StarCraft 2, I could be ranked 20 on the ladder and I could lose to rank 200s if they simply rolled the dice and threw a certain build order that happened to counter mine. And even if you try to be like an uncounterable build order in StarCraft 2, you could still be countered by something extremely greedy. So there was sometimes no winning to it. I know it's partially a skill issue as well, but it was always enough in Warcraft 3 to come back as long as you're better, because there was so much space and flexibility and elasticity in every part of the game, the skill expression in battles, that it didn't come down to build orders. The kind of black and white instant victory conditions that StarCraft, Brood War or SC2 had didn't apply in the same way in Warcraft 3. It's just a less cheesy game. It's not perfect, I know that now, especially with more perspective on other games, but the hero fantasy, the replayability, the extreme replayability of Warcraft 3 and how every game feels different because of different items, hero combinations and whatnot, so many different maps. And not even to speak of the map editor and all the different games and genres that it ended up sparking. The fact that its engine works better than StarCraft Brood War, and that you have these interesting moments where you can body block reliably or break free from body blocks, surround or break free from them with extensive micro, that really rubbed me the right way, and it's why it's my all-time favorite game, Warcraft 3. So, there you have it, some of my favorite games of all time. I'm interested to hear, if you have made it this far to the video, what are your favorite games? You can give me your top 5 and maybe I'll check out some of them to be played sometime, or at least I can have some fun with it. I do read all comments for all the videos that I upload here, so it'll be interesting to see. And if you have made it this far and you enjoyed this content, please consider hitting a subscribe. I see that over 80% of people that watch the video aren't subbed, which is awesome because it means the YouTube algorithm is working. And if you don't want to, you don't have to. But if this is a reminder and you like it, then you can do it. And well, if you don't want to do it, then you don't have to do it.